Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So, hello, welcome. Lou, shut up. I'm teasing. This is a gathering of Alive and Well AIDS Alternatives. We're a nonprofit organization that was originally founded in 1995 by a group of people who are, like me, tested HIV positive and eventually came to question a lot of the common beliefs and ideas and approaches to testing HIV positive. My personal background is that I tested positive in 1992. My immediate response was after, oh my God, my life is over, what did I do, I'm so stupid and terrible, was to become involved with AIDS Project Los Angeles as a public speaker and an educator. With LA Shanti, I joined their support groups, and then I became a speaker on behalf of their support groups. And I was also elected to the board of the founding organization Women at Risk, which is an organization that's still going today. About a year and a half into my positive diagnosis and public service, I accidentally ran into some information that caused me to have questions about my own diagnosis, what I was teaching other people, what I had been taught to tell them about HIV and AIDS, and just made me stop and do a lot of research for some time. And it ultimately led to me taking a uncommon, I guess you could say, approach to testing positive, which I feel has been of great benefit to my life. Everything that we share is based on my research and the research of other people who are fundamental in establishing this group. It all comes from scientific journals, medical journals, publications put out by the World Health Organization, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control, from well-respected international news sources. And we put this together for other people because we feel that it's had such a tremendous, no pun intended, positive impact on our lives. We live without AIDS medicines, without the discomfort and the regimens and the health compromising aspects of that. We live without fear of illness to a large degree. We're human. And we live normal, active, productive lives, and we're here to offer that possibility to anyone who might choose also to take that path. We're not here to proselytize, we're not here to tell you what to do, we're not trying to convince you of anything. We're giving you an opportunity that we were really grateful that came our way. And like I said, it's not a philosophy or a belief system, it's all through factual data, and it's our job, so to speak, to share this as much as possible with people who are concerned about these issues, whether they've tested positive themselves or are just like most people on planet Earth. Their worldview is shaped by this whole concept of HIV and AIDS. We have a couple mission statements here if anybody's new to this and would like to take a look at what it is that we are and do. I'll be happy to throw them out to you guys, and you can give them to whoever would like to read about it. We have groups that we support, that we supply with our materials. We produce this book, What If Everything You Thought You Knew About AIDS Was Wrong? This is used at some universities around the country as course curriculum. It's made it to the United Nations. It's coming out in July in Italian, it's in Portuguese in Brazil, it's coming out in Spanish soon. There's a bootleg copy in France, there's a bootleg copy in the Philippines and Thailand. It's kind of funny, it's taken on a life of its own. Oh, me? Yeah, I wrote this. I'm trying to do a little 8.5 by 11 folded once brochure, and this happened. And it took me this to be able to do the little 8.5 by 11 folded brochure that's on the table. But what I try to do is give everyone the chance to take a look at information that I had to look everywhere for. It was like a mystery I was trying to solve. It was, following leads and to get to things that really had an impact on my life and on my thinking. I wanted to make it easier for the next person to come across this stuff and have all the references there, the resources there, in addition to everything is in simple layman's terms. In addition to that, there's also an appendix to the book called The Other Side of AIDS that shares the experiences of people who are like me and are not like me, in that we all have one thing in common, is that we don't follow doctor's orders. We've all tested positive. Some people have been ill and gotten better. Some people took the medicines and went off and are doing fine. All kinds of adventures, but they all are something that you don't normally see in the media, you don't normally hear about through AIDS organizations, and I think they're really important voices that need to be heard. So after all, the reference data are about 30 accounts from people who take a different approach to life with an HIV positive diagnosis, and they range all the way from housewives to former heroin addicts to people who were told that they would die of AIDS before there was ever even an HIV test. Were told their immune systems were completely blown out. People have been on the drugs and off the drugs, just a variety of experiences. Children, just everything in here that I could put together to share alternative information and even some hope, because it's sort of the way it's portrayed in the media most of the time. Is a pretty hopeless situation, and I think there's well-founded reasons to have a factual basis for hope in this situation. So we wanted to share that as well. And just about myself again, I've been positive since '92. I've never taken any AIDS treatments. If you go by contact tracing, I've been positive since 1985 and 1990, so that puts me at between, 10 and 15 years? My math sucks. I have a perfectly healthy son who will be 3 in September. He was born natural. No, I didn't take any medicines of any kind, any treatments of any kind. In 2 and point something years he's been here on planet Earth, he's never once been ill. He's exceptional in every aspect of his development and is just an amazing little human being. And I am not unusual. I think that's one of the most important things we have to say, is that I am not unusual. We are not unusual. People who test positive and make a choice to live in wellness without fear. And so part of our event this evening is to share with you some, stories from the front lines of people who've tested positive and gone against the systems, made a choice. Some do it by intuition, some do it through information, but everybody's made a choice to take a different approach than the standard approach, and everybody feels happy about where they're at today, so that's what we want to share with you. And see, we've got William, got Erik. Where the heck is Andy? Feel like being on a panel? Yeah? What a sport, thanks. Okay, well, he'll take Andy's place. And we can get started if you guys want. We're just going to keep it kind of casual, as you can already tell. And if anybody has wandered in since I started talking up here, just let me know, because we do have a free book and a free information pack for you if you're a first-time visitor. So, well, let's start with, everybody here has something to share from a slightly different perspective. And I guess maybe Greg, you want to go to really put you on the spot by just asking you to spontaneously join us?
Oh, no.
Because your story is so interesting about all of this.
Oh, okay.
And the last time we were here, the rule was you kept it to like 10 minutes.
Right.
So
is that what it is?
Yeah, plenty
Okay.
But you don't have to go that long.
That's your time for interaction.
Yeah.
All right. My name is Greg. I was tested positive back in 1980. I just forget the statistics. 89. Was never one to participate in any kind of risky behavior other than sex, and was never. Can you all hear me?
This is
okay.
a recording mic.
Oh, sorry. And I come from kind of a very drug-free background. I've never done drugs a day in my life. I've never smoked. Well, I take that back. I did smoke, but not grass. And I did inhale cigarettes. Never. I'm kind of one of those clean type people. I've always believed in health, and I've always believed prior to AIDS, taking care of the body in a good, natural, healthy way is the best way to go about it. So, against my doctor's better wishes, I never did the AIDS drugs. Basically because I felt fine, and I saw the people around me literally getting very ill. And you think back in 1989, when people were getting these horrendous doses of these test drugs, they were becoming very ill and dying. most of them. So I decided I wasn't going to go that route. And my philosophy was I was going to take care of things as they came along, if they happened, instead of taking drugs continuously, because that just naturally just scared me. I just was very apprehensive about that. Well, let's move on 5 years down the road. I heard some dissident information, and like most people in the world, I had never heard of dissident information on AIDS. And I started reading some articles, and it just kind of caught my attention. A lot of you might just say denial and, trying to find, a way out, but I was very curious. And by incredible fortune, I was led to Christine, and I learned and was doing research on a lot of the drugs and the treatments and the HIV test. Well, I had only had one HIV test, and it was done. My roommate was my doctor's nurse, and he was the one who delivered my HIV positive status. And he said, and of course I said, "Are you sure?" He goes, "Yes, I ran the blood. We had him run it through twice to make sure everything was going, was kosher." So I had no reason to doubt the test because it was touted as 100% effective, and that was that. So 5 years later, when I got this information, as just kind of a test to myself, just to see, well, I've heard of inaccuracies, and I've heard of people going from positive to negative to positive. Well, my second test was a negative test. Now, I want you to put a scenario to this. Had I done what my doctors had wanted me to, and my T cell counts were around 600, but they were still suggesting you do just a course of preventative drugs. There's absolutely no question in my mind that I'd be dead right now, because I saw people that I knew dying of the drugs at the time. So after that negative test, of course, there was a very huge thing lifted off my shoulders. Although at the time I was believing I was becoming a dissident myself, so the news wasn't quite as shocking. But then again, I was tested again positive about a few months after that. By this time, I wasn't concerned with it because I had read enough information. This has nothing to do with a belief system. I had read enough information. I had seen enough, what's the word? Research on the HIV test to know that it is a completely useless test. So, and then I had a fourth test done because I had to go into the hospital, not because of anything like that. I had my appendix taken out. And actually, that was my fifth test. My fourth and my fifth tests were also negative. So for 5 years of my life, I believed I was an HIV positive person. Now, I was an exception to the rule. I had a great attitude, didn't do drugs, took care of myself, I bought a house, and my friends were literally saying, "Why are you buying a house? Don't you want to travel?" In other words, don't I want to see and I'm not joking you. Don't you want to see the world before you die? And I'm looking at them, and it's amazing to me. If anyone should have that attitude, I should, not you. My friends should be encouraging me. But this is the mindset that AIDS has brought about in the community, and especially back then. Now because we know that it's on the decline, that the attitudes in people aren't dying when they're HIV positive. Now it's not so dire as it was back in those days. But by some good fortune and common sense in my own brain, and I think this is where everybody has to take responsibility for themselves now. And I think that's what this teaches us, and Christine teaches everybody, is don't listen to what we have to say to you, and don't take it verbatim. Do your own research, because there's so much information out there that you people will be blown away about. You can take what we tell you, I hope it gets you interested, but this is how this all got started. We simply took the advice, and we just simply took what was written at the time to be the truth, and it isn't. And so, take the information that we have, and then read it yourself. There's so much information out there, you'll be blown away, as I was, and as I still am about it. So I'm a success story in the fact that I'm here, I'm alive, because of my own intuition, by luck, too, because of Christine. And that's why I'm very happy to share it with anybody who wants to ask.
Thank you so much for that. It's like so great and so spontaneous. Thank you so much. Well, my job as a moderator here is to, move to the next thing, and I'm just going to throw in a few comments about myself because I have things I would like to tell you guys too. Greg is not the only one who's had the experience of testing positive, negative, and so forth. My first test was indeterminate. My second test was positive. A year and a half later, I went back to indeterminate. Then I tested positive, then I tested negative, and then I tested positive. So when you hear the line, the tests are 100% accurate, isn't it odd that we have two people tonight in the same room who've had the same experience, and we are not the only ones by any means. I got an email the other day from a woman in Chicago who lived in North Carolina at the time. She was admitted to the hospital with life-threatening pneumonia. They told her she had about 3 days to live. They HIV tested her and told her she had AIDS. They offered her AIDS medicines as well as pneumonia drugs. She took the pneumonia drugs but didn't take the AIDS medicines. Intuition, whatever, I'm not sure. Anyway, she recovered. She outlived the 3 days by several years, moved to another state, took an HIV test again, negative, took another one, negative. It's not that this is as accurate as it's made out to be, certainly. And there's something else that you mentioned. Oh, people around us. When I was on the board of Women at Risk, it was a requirement to be on the board that you be HIV positive diagnosed woman. Every single woman on the board during my 2 years of tenure who was on the drug therapies died. Every single one. It was the most harrowing experience. The gentleman who, I guess you could say, inducted me into the Speakers Bureau at AIDS Project Los Angeles, when he interviewed me, he had just gone on the drug therapies. By the time I had graduated, he died, and we had more or less the same T-cell count. I've seen that too, people around me who make different choices. There's literally, from my days with those groups and organizations, one person who I know has been on drug therapies on and off since 1992 who's still alive. I haven't talked to her lately. But I also, in my work with LA Shanti Foundation, when I was in the support group and a speaker for their support groups, I was in the Ladies with HIV support group, and oftentimes it was couples where the husband and the wife both tested positive. In 3 cases, the husband went on the drug therapies and died during the time I was in the support group, which was from 92 to 93. And the women are all alive and well today, not on any AIDS medicines. So that's another experience that I draw upon when thinking about these issues. Andy, do you feel like you want to go next? Andy has you okay? Yeah. Andy has a different experience with regard to all of this, and he's a real veteran. So tell us about that.
Okay. I tested HIV positive in August of 1985, and at that time, I was with a woman doctor who was mostly had babies as patients, and she had a few like me that were older. And she was very concerned about that it was airborne and her children or babies were going to get HIV. So she sent me off to this other guy, this Dr. Stricker, who evidently had a theory that HIV was the bovine virus that had been engineered by the National Health Institutes and put into the hepatitis B vaccine that was being tested both in the gay population and in Africa. And that's his explanation of why AIDS was so prevalent in those areas. So his treatment plan was to give me intravenous vitamin C and heparin, which thins the blood. And I did it a little while, but I quit because I just don't like taking medicine. I never did. And so at that time in '85, when I tested positive, I was getting all kinds of negative input from the doctors, the media, my lover, everybody, about how fatal this all was. And I was getting sick with like tons of canker sores and fatigue. And then something kind of just clicked, and I says, I got to get rid of this negative input. So I dropped my doctors and kind of cut out all the negativity, and I immediately started getting better, and I've been fine ever since, and I've never done the drugs. And I've had the hardest time is having to deal with friends. Like in '95, I lost 9 people who were all in the drugs, wouldn't listen to a thing I said, and were very adamant that I should be taking them. And I think the hardest part is that you get worn down by your friends, the doctors, and everybody that you should be doing something else. And that's the hardest part for me. And it's still hard. You know, every time I go see a doctor, they say, "Don't you really think you should be taking these drugs?" No matter how many times I say, "No, it's not where I'm going," you know. And I guess in '97, I found out about Christine, and I was just thrilled because I had come to the same conclusion on my own that she had, and that she starts presenting in these forums. I would say, as far as health, you really need to question everything and make your own decisions. Don't listen to any one person, because what I find is I draw on a lot of different disciplines and I merge them into one thing and see what works for me. And the main thing, I think, is to keep the negativity out and not buy into the fear, because I think that's the most detrimental thing. That's about it.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
great. Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard. I was talking with somebody on the telephone today who called, and we spent about 45 minutes on the telephone. He tested HIV positive the same year I did, 1992, and he's been fine until he decided that he would join a support group because he felt like he wanted a little therapy for free. And they offer that through LA Shanti Foundation, and he suddenly found himself having panic attacks and feeling really anxious about stuff and second guessing his decisions about things. He's very well read in the literature about this topic, but it's such a head trip. It's really hard, the pressure that you're under, even subtly, when people with the best of intentions say, "Oh, you haven't had AIDS yet? Oh, when you do get sick, do you have plans for this, that, or the other thing?" It's like people are wanting to communicate to you this destiny that may not be yours. And doctors do it, friends do it, support groups do it. I mean, support groups are supposed to be supporting you, and a lot of times they end up dragging you down. He was feeling very anxious, and the leader of the support group said, "Well, maybe you're having this sense of anxiousness because you realize you're in denial about your HIV status." Gee, that's a help. So it's a real head thing, you know, and you have to, I mean, I think all of us to a certain degree probably do this. We not only take good care of ourselves physically because I was scared into it. I eat organics and take lots of vitamins. I'm really glad I do. But also I'm very conscious of what I allow to go in my head, what kind of people I'll be around, what sort of language I'll listen to, what kind of terminology I'll put up with. And I think that's another thing. It's a very, very insidious so-called disease, this HIV. And it's out there to infect you, so to speak, in many, many subtle ways. And it's easier to be a heterosexual woman than it is to be a gay man, because I don't have to pick up Women's Day and look through ad after ad for pharmaceuticals and testing and sell my life insurance and all this other stuff. I really admire people who can keep their heads above that kind of droning on and on, HIV, AIDS, let it define your life, let it define your life, because it's very, very, very difficult. And that's another thing that we kind of do here together, in a sense, is we support people who want to make a decision that differs from where the mainstream is flowing.
One other thing. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. I think that a lot of people do not have the scientific background to really evaluate, so they just take on the doctor's opinions. I was a pre-med student, so I have some biology behind me. So a lot of things that are presented are really stupid if you look at it. You know what I mean? It's like you have a HIV antibody test, and they think, well, that means you have HIV. No, it's just the antibody. So that's a good thing. So there's just simple things that people, or common sense, if you have a little bit of understanding of the science. And I think that's the primary problem. A lot of people, they just turn off when they start talking about science because they just don't understand it or have the background to get it. And I think that's the sad part.
You say something?
Yeah, actually, can I tell a quick little story?
Sure.
Just in case any of you don't know, I'm gay. So this story, the story that I'm about to tell, I actually, this is during the time when I, being a dissident, as I don't particularly like the word, but I'll just use that word for now. I went out with a doctor, an AIDS doctor. Of course, I knew right off the bat this was going to be a really interesting date because I'm not shy and I'm very convicted. So we started talking about it, and I started asking him questions, you know, subtly introducing and getting his opinion. And one of the questions I asked him about, and what this story is about, is that even your doctors don't necessarily know that much about AIDS. Remember, they basically read the information just like you or I can. You know, it's those very few people in there who are actually doing the science behind AIDS and HIV. Everybody else reads what they print. So take that into consideration. So this guy is you know, telling me what he knows. And I asked him a question. I said, how can you explain the fact that they can't locate virus in people who have full-blown AIDS? And he goes, well, now we can. We have this great test. And I go, what is? He goes, a viral load test. And I at the time hadn't really heard about the viral load test. And if you all know, it's PCR created by Carrie Mullis, which is not really an AIDS test. So anyways, and I asked him specifically, I said, you're telling me that it detects live virus. In other words, you can look through a microscope, whatever it is, and you can see live virus. He goes, yes, you can see a ton of it. And I go, okay. I said, I can't talk with you about this right now because I don't know about it. Went back, talked to Christine, found out that it does not detect live virus at all. It's essentially what they call a biological Xerox machine, which isolates and locates particles of DNA and RNA of supposedly HIV. So just a small example, and magnifies them and kind of duplicates them. So it's even your doctors, and this was an AIDS doctor. Think how mortified I was. By the way, I didn't have a second date with this guy.
Yeah, that's another thing too. I think that people have the idea that if you want to question something as serious as HIV and AIDS, well, you have to have a degree. You have to be somebody who can be conversant in the terminology of science and medicine. And I think all of us have come to the conclusion that you just have to be a person who is willing to operate with independent thinking, common sense, and use your best judgment when looking at, nobody expects to be a geologist to go out and buy a house, or an investment banker to decide where you're going to keep your money. We're allowed to make other decisions in our lives without being trained, credentialed experts. I think this extends to a certain degree to those who want to take on that responsibility to our own health care. And a lot of the information that we make available is in very simple layman terms. And I've had similar experiences to you, not on dates, but I would interview AIDS doctors when, this is back when I believed I was dying. I wanted to find somebody that I could feel comfortable dying with, and so I wanted to find a doctor who was fun to talk to, looked at me in the eye, had good magazines in their waiting room, and seemed to know what the heck they were doing. And of course I never found that. But so I encountered a lot of doctors, and early on I noticed things that they say didn't add up to just what I had been taught in basic high school biology. Suddenly biology became very interesting to me. And as I've gone on with this, I have debated the chair of epidemiology at UCLA. I have debated with Roger Deedles, who's one of the lead authors on the AIDS multicenter cohort study. I have talked with many doctors and scientists and find that they don't know a lot of the science. They don't read a lot of the studies. They don't know how to read some studies. They're left behind on all of this stuff. They don't keep up with the latest. I've had numerous experiences with that. And I would just encourage anybody who thinks that you must have a degree or be credentialed, or you're not in a position to understand what may or may not be best to you, to give a try to just using your best judgment based on a variety of information and coming to what conclusion feels right to you. I see you shaking your head. We'll have questions later. Yeah.
Something came to mind.
Yeah, okay. Well, we'll have lots of time for that. Let's get on with this. Now, Erik and William have completely different experiences from me, Andy, and Greg. They've tried the medicines, so they're going to give us another perspective on all of this. I guess, you want to do it, William?
Yeah, that was last time. So.
Okay.
My name's William, and I got tested last year, so it's almost a year that I've known about all this, and then well, here's the scenario. I'll break it down. I got the flu, and it was one of these really bad flus where you just think, am I going to be able to get up in the morning? That sort of thing. And it was lasting for a very long time, and it wouldn't go away. I finally, even though I hate going to doctors, I finally decided I better go to a doctor and see somebody. Maybe he can give me something. And I went there, and he said, well, I'd like to test you for the HIV virus. And I said, all right, fine, go ahead. And he said, I'd also like to give you a viral load test. So about a week later, when the results came back, his office called me up, and they made an appointment for me to come in and see him. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, this doesn't sound good. So I go in there, and meanwhile, he didn't give me any sort of anything for my flu. He didn't give me any medication for my flu. He was just like, just keep drinking fluids. And I go in there, and he says, well, the good news is that the AIDS test came out negative. I was like, well, that's great. But the viral load test is like 500,000 off the chart, So basically he told me that I had AIDS, or that I had HIV, and because of the viral load being so high, his recommendation was that I go immediately, and he prescribed, these 3 drugs, and he gave me a list to take to the pharmacist and so forth. They sent the social worker in. She talked to me, I'm like, crying. And so I decided to wait a month before I go on these medications and try and get some more information first. All right, the information I got wasn't the best information because it was like through APLA or, one of these organizations. And so I ended up going to this clinic, and the doctors there said, oh, you should definitely, go on these medications. By this time, I'm feeling like 1,000 times better. I'm over the flu, and I start these medications. Well, I'm on these medications for 3 months. I was taking Combivir and Sestiva, and Combivir is a combination of 2 antiretrovirals. And, I got involved with this support group, and everyone in the support group was like, oh, you know what? Everybody feels these side effects for the first month, and you get used to them after a while and stuff. So I was basically being programmed, even though I felt like shit taking these drugs. But, it's going to go away, and so it didn't go away. 2 months lapsed by, and I'm still feeling like, now it's to the point where I can't get up in the morning. I feel like a dog, just on a really bad day. And I just kept throwing up all the time. Every time I'd take the medication, then I'd reach into the sink, grab the medication, try and take it again because it's expensive, And, and obviously my body's telling me, don't take this medication. So finally, I just couldn't take it anymore, and I said, forget it, I'm not taking it anymore. And I stopped. Within the next day, I felt like a new person. I felt like reborn. I felt like I'd never lived before. That's how good I felt after I stopped taking the medication. And then I started doing more research, and I read up on the Duisburg book, and then I found out about Christine's organization and stuff. So I've been off the medications now for 9 months or something, and I haven't been sick once. I'm, healthy. It took me actually probably a good 3 months to finally, I started getting this really bad eczema on my face from doing the medications and stuff, and it took 3 months to finally allay all those side effects, but I was feeling fine. So I encourage everyone not to take those drugs. That's it.
Okay. That's his opinion.
Yeah, that's my opinion.
Opinions expressed by the panel members may not be those of the organization endorsing the panel. I just wanted to make a point. Some people who are sitting here for the first time might be going, geez, there's no balance on this panel. All these people have, decided they don't want to take the drugs, or they've taken the drugs and gotten ill. They've seen their friends who do what they're supposed to be doing die. We don't feel any particular obligation to present a balanced view because we've had about 16 years now of basically a monologue on this where people like William, like Greg, like Andy, like Erik, like me are not in the media. We're not being honored. We're not, spokespersons on a wide scale. We're not reported on. So you've had the other side of all of this stuff. We're giving you a new point of view. So if anybody's going, gee, this seems a little unbalanced, it's designed to be that way. It's designed to introduce you to stuff you've probably never seen before, because basically what we have going on is a monologue. One thing I wanted to say about viral load, since you brought it up, is in the book there's an entire section on viral load. For anybody that's here for the first time, it's on page 36, What's Up with Viral Load. Some of the issues that are raised by viral load is viral load, it says right on the manufacturer's literature, if you can get a hold of it, it says this test is not intended to be used as a screening test for HIV, which was used in his case, or as a test to confirm the presence of HIV infection, which is used for all the time. It's not designed to do that. It's not FDA approved to do that, because it is not actually testing for the presence of virus. It cannot confirm infection. Also, people who have had viral loads in hundreds, thousands, have also been HIV negative beyond one test. They are consistently HIV negative yet have viral loads. Viral loads don't necessarily correlate with T cell counts. They say that the virus is destroying the T cells, therefore if you have a lot of virus you'd expect to see low T cells. Well, when you're using a test that's not really testing for the virus, you can get things like high T cell counts, high viral load, low T cell count, low viral load. There's a woman who was going to appear on the panel tonight until she remembered it was being taped, who has been undetectable for several years with her viral load, yet she gets the flu every year. My viral load was at 330,000 once. I think you win though.
Yeah.
I was not ill. It inexplicably dropped to 980, which is just a little bit above detectable. There was no rhyme or reason in my life for that. As a matter of fact, when it was at 980, I got pneumonia. Also, on the same day, about the same hour, my brother got pneumonia. He's HIV negative, 5 years younger than me, and an avid surfer. You don't even know the meaning of the word avid until you meet my brother. He took 3 months to get over his pneumonia. I took about 3 weeks. I used all natural therapies. There were some head trips there. Middle of the night, waking up, fluid. I can hear it in my lungs. I'm going, this is really embarrassing. My God, this is really going to look bad. I had a certain amount of pressure on me. But, I let myself get over it, and I protected my head. I did not go to an HIV specialist and have him either presumptively diagnose PCP or tell me I had an AIDS-related pneumonia. I asked my neighbors. This is a really interesting thing to do. Try asking your neighbors and college students, especially about pneumonia. It's amazing how many people get pneumonia. Not many people know. Johnny Cash had PCP pneumonia not too long ago. Bob Dylan was hospitalized for several weeks in New York with PCP pneumonia. Did anybody try to shove an HIV test down Bob? I doubt it. Was anybody doing his viral load? I doubt it. He got better. We tend to forget all that stuff. So viral load is another thing that we've come to question based on good reasons to question it. Factual data that brings the diagnostics, not only viral load, but the T cell counts and the HIV test into question. So I really encourage you to, if you're new, to check out that information in this book here. Erik. Erik has a medication story to tell us too.
I'm Erik. Hi, and I've been positive since 1990. Found out February of 90. So obviously, all that time has gone by. I know I can sort of guess a point where I converted, if you want to say that. In '88, I went and lived in England, and I worked for the National Health Service. Worked in a hospital, an HIV/STD clinic. And they had to test you for, if you're going to work there, you had to be vaccinated for TB. So I was tested negative, and I got the TB vaccination. Fine. A year later, I come back. So between 88 and 90, I converted somewhere in there. So I found out I was positive in 90. So I say about probably 10 or 11 or 12 years now, something like that. I found out I was positive down in Long Beach. I came back here to go back to school. I found I was positive. Said, okay, I'm gonna, I was just gonna, okay, I know what I'm gonna do now. So I'm not gonna freak out and all this stuff. I'm gonna get the drugs. I'm gonna be fine. I'm really gonna take the bull by the horns. So I got on AZT. I've always been I've always questioned doctors and everything in my life. I'm the wrong kind of person you want to hook up with, because I'm always like, in the back of my mind, you know, that bumper sticker, question authority. Well, that's me. I went to Harbor UCLA, to the AIDS clinic there. They gave me AZT, tested, my first T cell counts, they were like 460. So they said, oh yeah, well, you can go on AZT. So I got on the AZT, and at the time they were prescribing 600 milligrams a day. Well, I thought that was a bit much myself, so I was taking 3. And they came to find out that it was doing the same thing to my immune system that the 600 dosage was. And a year prior to that, they were doing 1,200 milligrams. And when I worked at the clinic in London, that's what they were doing. They were giving people 1,200 milligrams. And so I kind of saw what it had done to these people. So they thought I was quite interesting, because I was fooling around with my medication. So they were following me. My T cells went up to like 1,200 after a few months, and then they started to drop. And fast, boom, boom, boom. I was going back every month, and I was like, oh. And then that was about a year and a half, I'd say. In the meantime, immediately when I started taking the AZT, I started feeling like I had the flu all the time. And I was 23, and that's pretty unusual for a 23-year-old, because at that age, we all know we want to go out and run around all the time, have some fun. Well, I would come home from work and plop down on the couch and not move, because my body ached, headaches. I just couldn't do anything. It was like constant symptoms of the flu. I would go tell them that I wasn't feeling well, and they said, well, what do you expect? You're HIV positive. You know, that's the way it is. That's how you feel. And I said, oh, okay. All right, well, that's what you say. So I was going on with the meds. And then, like I said, my T cells started to drop. And then at that time, DDI came along, and DDC. Those two came along, and they said, okay, well, Erik, because then they dropped down to like 500 or 600 after being at 12, and they said, well, let's add the DDI to the mix and see if that does anything with your immune system. But before that, we doubled my AZT dosage to 600, didn't do anything. The T cells kept dropping. So then we added the DDI to the mix. Immediately, the next day after taking the first DDI pill, I threw up. Next day, I thought, well, maybe I have the flu or something. Because I wasn't nauseous. I didn't feel like the flu. It was like I popped the pill within an hour or so. It was like, whoop, instantly upheaved. So I said, okay, well, this is interesting. So I took it again. Same thing happened again. I said, okay, my body's telling me it does not like this drug. So I stopped taking it. And it got to the point where, well, I was getting pretty tired of feeling sick all the time. I went home to visit my parents for a weekend once, and I was sort of at wit's end as far as, well, do I want to stop taking the medicines and feel better while I can, because I'm going to die. So I might as well enjoy the time feeling well before I start getting really sick. And I thought to myself, well, okay, what am I going to do? So this is the way I handled it. No one was home. I had the house to myself, and I just really sat down and said, okay, God or universe, or however you want to put it, I said, I'm going to put this problem in your hands. People are always talking about this. So I said, I'm going to sit here and listen real quietly, and if you tell me to stay on the meds, I will. If you say to get off the meds, I will. I'm going to trust in my intuition. So a voice or a feeling came to me and said, drop the medicines. So I said, what? Well, that's not what the doctors are saying. So I said, that's kind of out of left field. So I dropped the medicines. I said, okay, I'm going to trust in you. About 2 weeks later at work, or a week later, about 2 weeks later, and at this time I didn't know anything about heal or anything like that. So I was doing this all on my own. So the terror of HIV is still there. Everything. I'm still scared out of my wits about what to do, what I was doing to myself. I was sitting at work, and all of a sudden I felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders. I was literally, feeling like I had the flu, to feeling like my old normal self again before, I was like, oh, I want to go out tonight. Let's go dancing and stuff. But it was at work, literally, it just kind of dissipated everything. And I realized that's when the medicines where they left my body. And I've been clean off meds ever since then. I've never been a real promiscuous person. I've never done a lot of drugs. And I do more stuff now than I did when I was back then. I'm more willing to try things. But at that time, I was real just, I'm not doing anything. Because when I was like 18, 19, that's when people always started to die. So I was like, I'm going to be real careful. So that about sums it up. Well, as far as, like Christine's saying, taking your health into your own hands, when I moved up here, I got a doctor, an HIV doctor, and I went to him, and that's when 3TC and everything was out. He's like, okay, I'm going to tell you what I want you to do. So I said, okay, we're going to do all your counts, we're going to do all this and that, and my T cells, they're still 400. Back to where they were 10 years ago, the T cells are in the 400s, and nothing's changed. Viral load, if you want, 5,000. So everything, and I don't pay any attention to that anymore. But I asked him, he was telling me what he wanted to do. I said, well, I looked at him in the face and said, can you tell me how effective these are? And he was very put off by the fact that I was asking him, questioning his authority. And he's like, no, this is what I want you to do. And I said, no. I said, well, how effective are these? And he kind of looked at me and he said, well, there's a 40% failure rate. These don't work on 40% of the people we give them to. And I was like, oh, okay, so you want me to take these and there's really no guarantee, but they're making people sick. And I said, no. I still go to this doctor just to make him mad. I go for a physical, yearly physical, and, to get checked. He said, well, I was wondering where you went. I go, do you think I died or something? He's waiting for me to get sick so he can prove me wrong. He always tells me, you're back to, the assault on that. You're going to die, he said. Your immune system is going to unravel to the point where we can't help you. And I said, look at me. I'm chubby and I'm healthy and, I said, if anything, the HIV caused me to get fat because I found out and hopped in the refrigerator, me and Sarah Lee and ice cream and everything. So that's that. And really, listening to your health, for example, I had a herpes outbreak or cold sore outbreak in my mouth once, really bad. At the time, I was under a lot of stress in my life. Went to the doctor, urgent care. And the doctor there said, oh, well, yes, you have an outbreak of oral herpes. And I said, well, you going to give me anything? I'm HIV positive. I thought, well, since I'm HIV, I'll get all the best treatments and all the best medicines. So he said, no, I'm not going to give you anything. He said, there's something I could give you that might help, but you're in the middle of the outbreak, so it probably won't help. He said, you just go home and take Tylenol and join the rest of the world because you now have herpes. Most of the world has herpes, he said, in one form or another. And he said, you just bear with the pain, the Tylenol will kill it. And I said, well, why? He goes, well, I'm not giving you anything because as a whole, this is when listening comes in, as a whole, we over-medicate HIV-positive people. So over-medicate that's the key word. And stuff like that always sticks with me. And I always listen to stuff like that. You can glean information from the doctors, what they say and stuff like that. Anyway, so here I am today still and fine, healthy, and happy, I guess.
Except for that damn social stigma, right?
Oh yeah, and the only problem I have now with being HIV is that I don't take the meds. So I go out with people on a couple dates and I tell them I'm positive, but then the double whammy comes when I say I don't take the medicines, and they're like, oh. No, to them it's happened a number of times. To them I'm just dead meat. I said, well, you're gonna die. I can't go out with you. So I'm like, oh, so now I'm dealing with those. Well, if I was taking the meds, I'd be dating material. But if I'm not taking the meds, I'm going to die, and I'm not dating material. So this is all very interesting. So that's the only effect that HIV is having on my life at this time.
Thanks. Well, I thought too, after I went and told you that I had pneumonia, I forgot to mention that was in 1996. And I haven't been ill since then. And right after I had the pneumonia and recovered in 3 weeks, I got pregnant. And pregnancy is a time of natural immune suppression for any woman. And I watched my HIV negative cohorts, I call them, my girlfriends who are HIV negative and who were pregnant about the same time as me. Most of them were younger than me. They got chronic yeast infections, real common when you're pregnant because your immunity is lowered. If I would have had that being HIV positive, guess what it would have been called? AIDS. One of my girlfriends got toxoplasmosis, very serious. It's also an AIDS-defining illness. If I would have had that, AIDS. I had no problems whatsoever during this time of natural immune suppression. Delivered a perfectly healthy baby, all naturally. He's never been ill. I have not been ill since. Since my son has been born, it will be 3 years in September. I have not slept a night through. I get probably, my average, I would say, not that I like it this way, is about 5-6 hours sleep a night. I work like a dog. I'm constantly running around with my son. Anybody who knows my son knows he's the human energy machine. He's just amazing. We have a couple babysitters there tonight that can attest to that. They're still tired. But I don't get sick. And the point I want to make is that I think all of us allow, well, William, you haven't, you're a neophyte. All the rest of us, we allow ourselves to get sick, and we allow ourselves to get better, and we don't freak out about it. I'm sure in the time that you guys have been diagnosed positive, or in your case negative, positive, whatever you are, that you've had things like herpes that could be considered an AIDS-defining illness. The difference between us and other people is that we have an inherent respect, maybe, for our right to have a problem and get over it without looking at that as the beginning of the end, or treating that as the beginning of the end, or going to someone who will support the notion that that is the beginning of the end. And there's other people who have had some really harrowing experiences, who have held their ground, and it's really amazed me that they've done that. And they've proven time and again that you can test HIV positive, you can get sick just like everybody else, just like your neighbors, just like your friends, just like your relatives, and get better. Ooh, alert the media. But it's not, the system out there doesn't acknowledge that that's possible. So that's just one thing I wanted to add to that. And with regard to T cells, you said about your T cells, there was a study done of Olympic athletes in 1984, I believe it was. Their average T cell range, the finest, the fittest in America, was between 400 and 600. Back in '92, when I tested positive, and about the same time you did, 500 was considered you're descending into AIDS. So it's really interesting how these trends change, how these ideas change, and also when you take an outside comparison, there's very little outside comparisons to the things that are held as hard and fast rules in AIDS. I used to subscribe to a chronic fatigue immune deficiency newsletter. When I tested positive, I was just looking for any information anywhere. I noticed in the information in that newsletter, people who had chronic fatigue were actually very sick, who were succumbing to, various illnesses after illnesses, who had a very hard time getting up in the morning, functioning, had T cell counts that were all over the place. And my personal experience was when I tested positive, now mind you, if you go by the rule of contact tracing, in '92 I'd already been positive since '85, or somewhere in between '85 and '90. That's the window of a relationship I had with somebody who also tested HIV positive. My T cells were at 1700. And this is also interesting about that is that I had been misdiagnosed and on a medicine for 18 years that was wreaking havoc on my immune system, unbeknownst to me. It became very apparent when I started almost passing out. My hair was falling out. I had night sweats for years. My hands shook. I had leg cramps so bad I couldn't sleep a night through. I've got this karma about not sleeping a night through. Go from leg cramps to the sun. But I was taken off of this medicine. I was re-diagnosed as not having the problem I was originally medicated for. And at that time, I was told by several experts in the field that I was severely immune suppressed because of the medicine that I had taken. And that's why I had things like, I had chronic herpes cold sores. They were either coming, there, or going away. I was just in a constant cycle of herpes cold sores when I was on this medicine. When I went off, it took about a year for me to start to know what it's like to feel normal. I never knew before. So I went from having a totally blown out immune system, according to medical experts, because of this medicine, to testing HIV positive and being told I had one of the most perfectly intact immune systems ever seen because I had 1700 T cells. So, go figure. All these rules that they would like us to accept as being hard and fast, black and white, in the real world, they just really don't apply. We can, Jeff?
Yeah, actually, I'd like to also make a little point about T cells. Prior to AIDS, high T cell count was considered to be more a sign of a healthy immune system. And let me run a scenario by you, which was a common scenario many of us experienced. A person would go in diagnosed with HIV. Then they'd get their T cell counts. Now, most of you and I know that they probably ended up having low T cell counts, anywhere between, well, let's just say down to 200 maybe, let's say. They would get on the drugs AZT. Their T cells would shoot up. And it was touted that the AZT and the AIDS drugs are starting to help the immune system. And after a certain amount of time, T cell counts would start dropping. Well, what happens when you enter any toxic substance into the human body, your immune system reacts to it by producing T cells. Your body has no reason to produce T cells if there aren't toxins or microbes in your system. Henceforth, a low T cell count would be logical. Essentially, look at them as being your body's vacuum cleaner. If there's no infection, why would your body produce a lot of? This line of thing was changed to suit the AIDS model earlier on. So low T cell counts, like the study that she was talking about, perfectly HIV negative athletes, T cell counts between 2 and 600. So just a bit of information to know that low T cell counts, that what T cells really do in the system. And if you look at it in a logical step, it does make sense when doctors talk about low T cell. And also, after they would be on the AIDS drugs for a while, the T cell counts would start dropping down and get low again, and then they go, oh, the AIDS virus has taken over, is killing the body. In essence, what has happened is that the AZT drugs have destroyed the immune system, the bone marrow, the body's ability to produce the immune system again, and that's when their immune system drops down so very low.
For anybody who
That's all in the
for
book.
whom this idea might be unfamiliar, I should know this by now, what page this is on. On page 29 of the book, there's an AZT label that most people don't get to see. Right now, Rodney's passing around a little box. If you can make a contribution to help us keep our work, we're a 501c3 nonprofit. I'm the only salaried, there's me and a part-time person who works in the office. Nothing else is needs to be industrial strength AZT. This can't be the AZT they give people because it's got a skull and crossbones on it, and that's the international sign of poison. Well, this is an AZT label. This is when it moves from lab to lab, but it's AZT, and the dosage in the bottle contains less most often than what an AIDS patient would take or an HIV positive diagnosed person would take. This was a drug that was created originally as a chemotherapy and failed as a chemotherapy and was shelved for some 30 years before it was brought out to test for the first time on human beings in the first AIDS drug trials. And DDI, 3TC, D4T, all those drugs are in essence AZT. They work in the same way. They're modeled after this. They're just slightly different chemical compounds. And all these drugs do the same thing. They indiscriminately destroy DNA chains as they're forming in the body. You can't destroy a virus, so you have to eliminate the cell in which the virus inhabits. So these drugs randomly destroy cells. That's what they're designed to do. And people think, oh, we've come so far, we've got the protease inhibitors. They're called protease inhibitor cocktails because they're mixed with 2 parts this, 1 part protease inhibitor, usually. So we have not really moved from this point here. And the first trials of AZT drugs were extremely flawed, if anybody's ever seen the research on that. The placebo groups were immediately unblinded. Everybody knew who was taking it because there were so many profound side effects from the AZT. Patient data was fudged. People were given transfusions to keep them alive so they could complete the study. They lost track of patients. And also, too, very interesting, a new book just came out. I can't remember the title offhand, and it's not dementia, it's just lack of sleep. But in this book, this doctor, he's at UC Davis, points out that in the original AZT trials, people who were included in this trial had not tested HIV positive by standard tests, by ELISA and Western blot. If you tested P24 antigen positive, that was enough to be included in the first AZT trials, and we now know that people who are HIV negative can test positive for P24. People who test HIV positive are often P24 negative. So you also have mixed into that, which was basically AZT was the basis for everything we have today. There are no drug studies that test AIDS drugs against no drugs, that take people taking, Combivir or Zyogen or Sestiva or anything and test them against people who are taking nothing, because it was decided based on the AZT trials that these drugs had efficacy and so should not be denied to people. So ever since then, there have been no scientific studies that endeavor to prove if people taking any treatments at all do better than people taking no treatments at all. They're just not out there. So that's something to think about too. Let's open it up to questions, and we'll do that for a little while, and then we can go snack and hang out. And if anybody has a question that you don't feel like asking in front of anybody else, that's great. You can contact us by email, you can contact us by phone. Our address and all that stuff is all over everything, and you can also contact us while we're snacking. So let's see. Tina?
Yeah, if I can just announce a couple of things that are really, really cool. Does anyone know the work of Hulda Clark? Have they heard about her work? She just got out of prison. She's been doing some work with getting people well with turning their body around with a little electronic device, and she's got a lot of doctors pretty upset, a lot of FDA people. She just got out of jail. KCET is doing a special on her. You might want to pick it up. It's been running the last few weeks. It's on 3:30 on Sunday, Tony Brown's show, and it's pretty neat stuff. And last night, I don't know if anyone heard the Mike Siegel show, or does anyone know Leonard Horowitz and his book? It's Emerging Viruses, AIDS and Ebola. If anyone read it, it's pretty extraordinary about telling where he's got it coming from. So it's really, really informative. He was interviewed on Mike Siegel last night. And if you wanted to you could even get his, he's got a tape, Horowitz on vaccines, which is really amazing to get to. But I have his number if anyone needed that information, 888-508-4787. But it just explains how AIDS is working and how it was actually introduced, and particularly to Africa. He had a really, really cool thing to say. There was a gentleman that was doing research. I can't remember his name, but he was working with oxygenation therapy here in the United States. I think it was a Dr. Birnbaum, something. They kicked him out of here. So Kenya picked him up. He's the Minister of Health and Minister of AIDS in Kenya. They brought him 350 full-blown AIDS, ready to die in a few days kind of candidates turned around with oxygenation. So he's over there in the government, helping to. It's just neat. It's like it's all this stuff.
You word about Hulda Clark and her electronic device that you alluded to. There's an electronic device that some people call a zapper, some people call a pulsar. What it is it emits a light electronic impulse. You put it on pulse points in your body, and it's designed to kill off viruses, bacteria, and other disease-causing microbes without disturbing the natural balance that needs to be there. One of the companies that manufactures it is called Soda Instruments, and they're in Washington. Interestingly, they contacted me because people have made claims about these machines that if you use them and you test HIV positive, it will eradicate your HIV and you will test HIV negative. And if you are HIV positive and have a viral load, these machines will eradicate your virus and thus lower your viral load. And this was promised by the gentleman who invented the machine, Bob Beck, and other people who write about these machines and use these machines. Soda Instruments called me. And they said, we've got this really weird situation on our hands. We sell these instruments to people who test HIV positive, and they're buying them based on the notion that they're going to test HIV negative or have no viral load after they use them. And they report back to us many, many times, more often than not, that they are clinically well after using these machines, that what illnesses they were experiencing, what actual physical clinical illnesses they were experiencing go away. But they don't test HIV negative afterwards, and many of them still have these viral loads. How would you explain that? So I was on the phone with them for quite some time and then sent them a book and some materials about how the diagnostics don't work, because the HIV test is not testing for the presence of the virus, and the viral load test is not testing for the presence of the virus. So it's very interesting, because now Soda Instruments, they have my book in their catalog, and they encourage people who call and say, I've had this inexplicable experience. I'm better, but my test results don't say I'm better. They say, well, hey, read this. And they tell me, too, your work confirms our work, and our work confirms your work, because you're saying that people can be clinically well and test HIV positive, and we're seeing that over and over again, that making these things go away doesn't necessarily bring, making the illnesses go away doesn't turn people from negative to positive, and that would make sense because the test is not a test for HIV and viral load, is not a test for the virus itself. And with regard to Len Horowitz, I just want to issue everybody a little bit of a caveat there. Len Horowitz is under the impression that AIDS was introduced into society through a government, the bovine engineered, thing that was put into vaccines and stuff like that. He raises some really great points about, the dangers of vaccination, lots of questions about those, but I think he does a disservice in the long run. First of all, he really exaggerates what is going on. He's a person who uses the harrowing estimates rather than the unspectacular actual numbers. He calls Ebola and AIDS emerging viruses. There have been less than 700 deaths worldwide in 20 years from Ebola. There are about 1,200 people in this country who die each year choking on their food. Added up, you don't get anything much emerging unless you consider choking on your food an emerging problem. With regard to AIDS, he is what I would call, my personal opinion, after I've been on the radio and debated him, I've tried to debate with him in public forum. He told me he would think of an analogy as to why he couldn't and get back to me. Haven't heard from him since. But his idea with AIDS to me is it's very much fear-based and fear-mongering. The problem is worse than what we perceive, and the government has done something terrible to people. I think that's a very disempowering way to look at things. It's centralizing all the evil in the world and making it all about a nefarious, cloaked in black, dressed people kind of, plot things. I think what we have with AIDS is a situation that is kind of a melding of a lot of coincidental things. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control was sitting around going like this since polio. We haven't had any major, viral stuff. They're kind of like, what are we going to do? Legionnaires didn't go over, Hanta's not working out. They really didn't have much of anything to do. And they're all virologists because bacteria, that's old news. They were all virologists with nothing to do. This came along. It was originally introduced in 1981 by Michael Gottlieb here in Los Angeles, 5 men. He was out testing T-cell technology. He wanted to check what T-cells were in people who were having immune problems. He scoured hospitals to find 5 men who had Kaposi sarcoma or PCP pneumonia, therefore were immune suppressed, because those things normally don't happen to people with intact immune system, measured their T-cells, and from that came AIDS. It was assumed because the 5 men were all gay that the only thing gay men could have in common with each other is their gayness, therefore it's sex, therefore it's sexually transmitted, therefore it's a sexually transmitted epidemic. I mean, that's basically how all this got started. And I think what we have here is a situation of the pharmaceutical companies are a business. They're always looking to expand their markets, take things that don't cost a lot and sell them at a big profit. Every business tries to do that. And they're not benevolent entities. They're out there, trying to earn money. They pay people. Nobody works there for free. You have the CDC with a certain situation. The pharmaceutical companies seeing an opportunity in a certain situation, the moral majority, religious right, whatever you want to call it, seeing a certain situation. And I think all of these situations were kind of seized upon in a way that you can find parallels with all over the place. And I think to describe this as a government plot or government out to purposely kill us, which I do wonder about sometimes, but I think it disempowers people and it makes them feel as though they have no recourse in their daily lives to address the various issues that he brings up that are even responsibly presented. And so I just wanted to issue that caveat with Len Horowitz. Plus, I'm very reticent about recommending anyone who doesn't believe in honest, open public dialogue, and Len doesn't. And
Gotta work
so
on him. He was a little softer last night, but he was speaking about how it's important to build up the immune system. And
yeah, that's real important.
I mean, it was some good stuff.
Yeah, he's got some good stuff, but he's
yeah.
also very apocalyptic in his work. And his new thing is, what is it called? Like, he's become a born-again Christian. He was
Oh, I
he
didn't get
practiced
that last
Judaism,
night.
became a born-again Christian, and now he has biblical codes for surviving the apocalypse or something. Just, I don't know.
Christine, could I ask who doesn't mind being taped, or who does mind being taped, so I won't shoot them? 'Cause I'd like
Well,
to
how
get-
about when somebody raises their hand, we'll say tape or no tape.
Okay,
Is
that'd
that
be-
cool?
that'd be perfect.
Okay, yes?
No tape.
No tape, okay.
I just wanted to tell you all, I admire you all for coming here and sharing your story tonight, and I thank you for that.
No problem.
Yeah, it's
Thank
really,
you.
really nice to hear. And it's good to hear, positive thinkers, and also your comment about, having the negativity and the people in your life eliminated. Once again, you're choosing to not have toxicity in your life, whether it's coming from a pill or a person. So I think that's, bravo for you to have that. And also, this talk about viral load and T-cell, has anybody talked about these parasites, the intestinal parasites, or the testosterone levels, or DHEA, or any of these other factors that affect people in health and immunity? Do your doctors talk to you about that, or does anybody know enough to talk about that?
No, I don't, but I would like to comment on that. I think we have to remember, and one of the things that AIDS has brought about to the world is a certain amount of paranoia, as well as a bit of forgetfulness, that there's a lot of things in our life that toxify us, anywhere from the gases released from this carpeting, the walls, the paint in the wall, to the food we eat, to our environment, to the air that we breathe, to some of the foods that we receive. So to isolate any one thing that is really going to be the cause of immune suppression is going to be a slightly impossible task. I think it's just recognizing the fact that we do live in a toxic environment, and that we have to be very aware of what's around us, what we put in us, what we expose ourselves to, and be aware of it, because we will never really, well, I shouldn't say never, but it's going to be a while before they really ever determine what is the definitive cause of immune suppression,
Absolutely, yeah. I mean,
So
They
it's
going
today
on.
they just came out with a report saying that dioxins have been determined to cause cancer. These things have been around for I don't know, 40 since the Industrial Revolution, I guess. But and they're in everything. They're in all the food that you eat, for the most part, and in small quantities. And yeah, they cause cancer.
What's interesting too
Now we know
about
that they do.
dioxins, just a comment on, you can find parallels in other things. It's been known for quite before today that dioxins can cause cancer. They're used to create, they're used to bleach the materials in women's sanitary products that women put inside of themselves once a month for several days. The American Cancer Society has never said a darn thing about those dioxins. The American Cancer Society has never said a darn thing about pesticides in foods. I think we are all pretty much aware of the fact by now, from what we've read and heard, that pesticides and cancer do, there's a definite correlation there, and other chemicals. So you see, and also other disease entities and other industries where the persons at the head of the organizations advocating for that particular industry aren't doing everything they possibly could to make people aware of what the real risks are to their health and what the real courses are. They're not being inclusive about the information they provide. They're being very narrow in their scope and approaches to things. Yeah, tape or no tape?
No, okay.
Shy audience.
Oh, that's right.
You can show the book cover.
I just discovered I'm positive a few weeks ago,
Uh-huh.
and I've been studying both parties. Confused at this time.
Uh-huh.
And I know what medication can do. It's very toxic, because I used to work for mental health hospitals. Watch my patient go crazy just because they used to take this medication called Terexine. But anyway, I've talked to a lot of my friends about their health, and a lot of my friends, their partner passed away, how they died, and what caused their death, and so on. Very complex. There's so much information. I'm just a little confused what I should do. People think I should take cocktails. This group, whatever, said no, and I'm just standing by at this time. I want to learn more about it as far as what I need to do.
Yeah, it's a tough situation. I mean, honestly, had I discovered me in my present form when I first tested positive, I don't know what I would have made me out to be. I don't know what I would have made of all this information, because I was very, very frightened, and I believed absolutely what I was being told. I wanted to be proactive and responsible.
Right.
I had no particular desire to die. And to do so in unattractive, painful, and prolonged ways. I was very much on edge. It was hard to think straight. It was hard to sleep. It was hard to have a conversation. Everything was very difficult, and I don't know what I would have done in your position that you're in today. Does anybody?
Yourself. Just keep educating yourself.
Well, I'm learning about the other side.
Yeah.
There are people that stopped taking medication, and they're talking about T cells or whatever, gone down to less than 100, and then it was too late. And then they start taking cocktails, and then they're talking me out of taking and not taking it again. It's like he's confused. We're talking about this other person, he's a living proof, but he's dead now. He finally passed away, and so I'm hearing the stories left and right.
Yeah, there's stories that go both ways. There's stories of people who take the combination cocktails. I mean, we're certainly not here to say combination cocktails kill everybody who takes them and they ruin everybody's life. Some people take those things and they get better. I mean, we've had the stories over and over and over again in the newspapers and the magazines. Where we haven't seen those stories bear out is in the scientific studies. It's not something that can be duplicated over and over again, and that's what science is about, and that's what you call proof, is when you can do something again and again. You can do it to a group of people, and each person in that group responds in a fairly similar fashion. We don't have that. What we have some evidence for is that some people taking these drugs, protease inhibitors inhibit proteases. There's proteases in viruses, there's proteases in bacteria. If you're very sick and you've got bacterial infections, fungal infections, parasitic infections, viral infections, it could just be that a very, very, very powerful, previously unknown to man level of power, broad spectrum annihilator of proteases can help you out for a while. There is some evidence of that, but the evidence is anecdotal. If you look at the back of the drug ads, you will see either they have no references to studies. The most recent Crixivan ad, they changed it from a statement that it is not known at this time whether Crixivan will extend your life, or let's see what it said actually. It is not known whether Crixivan will extend your life or reduce your chances of getting other illnesses associated with HIV. That's what the Crixivan ad used to say. Now it says landmark studies show that people who take Crixivan had less AIDS-defining illnesses, and some other claim. They say it 2 times, landmark studies. There's no reference to the landmark study. There is no name to the landmark study. The landmark study was published nowhere. There's no doctors who will put their name on that landmark study and let everybody read it. I mean, you're talking about very, very tenuous sort of information. And I think you can hear stories going back and forth, and you can hear information going back and forth, and I think that maybe what Erik went through a little bit, and kind of what we all have come to in a certain sense, is just sitting with what we take in and making a real effort to take in stuff and just seeing how it sits with us, see what rings true. To me, I mean, and you know what? Independent thinking really isn't for everybody. That's the thing of this, is you have to be willing, if you're going to go against the system, to be the sort of person that can do that. Not everybody can. There's certain people that find more comfort and more satisfaction in being with the system than having to live with the constant turmoil of going against it. And we don't hold it against anyone. If they want to leave here and, stay on the drugs, start the drugs tomorrow, if it works for them, that's great. We're here to offer an alternative perspective. And it's certainly not for everyone. It may be for you, it may not be for you, but I would encourage you to give it a chance, to kind of sit with it, and also just ask yourself about, it sounds so new age, but what feels right? I mean, for me, a lot of my decisions were based on I used to work in the clothing industry in a sector that was rife with fraud and counterfeit. And I would notice a pattern when somebody was trying to sell me goods that weren't what they were supposed to be. And we're talking about, people want to sell me millions of dollars worth of stuff, and so I had to develop a sense for whether or not I was being, dickered around with. And I developed that sense, and I noticed certain things. I wasn't allowed to ask a lot of questions about these goods. It was such a good deal, I had to act right now. The questions I was allowed to ask didn't have reasonable answers. I wanted to see some paperwork. I wanted to see some proof of origin. Well, everybody knows. I mean, everybody buys this. Come on, what's wrong with you? It was kind of always this pressure of authority. I also noticed that reasonable things suddenly became unreasonable. I was offered one time a container load, which is this huge, thing that they move on trains and put on ships and stuff, of what were supposed to be genuine used Levi jeans, which were very hard to get in, excellent quality, perfect size range. And they wanted payment by letter of credit. Letter of credit is a long drawn out process. You have to go to the bank and do this, and the bank takes fees, and once you get the thing going, if you decide you don't want to participate in the deal anymore, you can't undo the letter of credit. It ties up your company's money. How much easier is it to pay cash? So I'd say, hey, if I'll pay cash. No, we don't accept cash. Who doesn't take cash? Who the heck doesn't take cash? Oh, it's too much to sit there and count. Okay, I'll get you a cashier's check. No, we want a letter of credit. I later discovered they want the letter of credit because they want to take my money, tie it up for a month, put it in their account, buy some other stuff and sell it to somebody else 6 or 8 times during the 30 days my letter of credit is open. Perfectly reasonable question. Can I pay cash? No. That doesn't add up. Another quick, can I inspect the goods? You can send in an inspection service. There was this inspection service called SGS. It's a Swiss company, and they will inspect goods for you. What they can't do, it reminds me so much of these HIV diagnostics, because they can tell you if the pants in the box are denim, 14 ounce, if they have the word Levi's written on them, they have 5 buttons, on the fly, and a little pocket here, and a red tag on the back, but they can't tell you if they're really Levi's. They can only tell you if they look like Levi's, have the same measurement as Levi's, the same weight as Levi's, but they cannot tell you if they're Levi's. I know my business, I know Levi's, I want to inspect the goods. No. So I had to have a surrogate marker. I had to have SGS service, which is kind of like the HIV antibody test. It doesn't really test for the HIV, it tests for proteins that are supposed to represent HIV, but none of the proteins strictly belong to HIV. So I'm like, ooh, red flag, viral load, ooh, another red flag. It's not really telling me if those goods are what they're saying they are. And then I had a lot of questions, why can't I pay cash with regard to, medical issues? And it was always, we know better than that. Everybody knows that. Well, that's a silly question. They're stupid. Those were the kind of answers I got, and that, more than any scientific information, to be honest with you, is what steered me towards really investigating the scientific information, was the fact that there was a certain kind of a posturing, an attitude, a reluctance to just really come clean. When I was at AIDS Project Los Angeles, I said, Peter Duisberg, you guys say he's a big jerk. The guy's a molecular biologist. He's with the National Academy of Sciences. Robert Gallo wasn't for a very, very long time. He was nominated for a Nobel Prize. It was called the father of retrovirology. You say he's a jerk and he's misleading everyone. Why don't we do this? Why don't we invite Peter Duisberg to sit down and present his point of view, and then we at APLA, we get a bunch of doctors from, our point of view to go, counterpoint with him, and then we can all decide, what a big jerk he is and settle this once and for all. Because if I'm being misled by this, I bet there's a lot of other people who are being misled too. Let's do everyone a favor and just hash it out. No, that's dangerous. That's irresponsible. He's an idiot. He's stupid. He's been proved wrong. Can you show me where? Well, everybody knows. That's the kind of stuff that at least for me, when I sat and thought about this, that's what spurred me on to go further, because it was just like something didn't add up. It didn't seem right to me. If you are an organization like AIDS Project Los Angeles, like AMFAR, and you're looking for answers, There are no questions you're afraid of. There are no debates you won't show up to a certain degree, because you're looking for answers. And it is only through questions that we learn. And when somebody doesn't like questions, that to me is red flag. And so I don't know if any of that long-winded story helped you, but for me, I saw a correlation in things that I knew for fact and that I could, count on and trust. And then that compelled me to go further and not just take it face value.
I just want to add one more thing. When you're talking about this issue with people who are out there and are following the mainstream or who have had lovers who've died, I mean, I know a person who actually administered a lethal dosage because his lover was so sick and in so much pain. He basically killed his lover because he was in so much pain. Now, when you're discussing this issue with people who have seen their friends dying, and they've seen their lovers dying, and they've gone through the whole gamut of emotions seeing these people die, a lot of them, the last thing they want to admit is that, they actually, took their lover to the hospital to, have these drugs administered to them, or, they will not want to admit that maybe their lover didn't die because they have HIV, but maybe their lover died because the medications they were taking were killing them, And then to top it off, like they ended up administering the lethal dose, There's a lot of emotion involved in that. So you have to weigh that side of it too,
Yeah, I just want to also say you don't have to rush to a conclusion. You take your time and don't feel pressured that you have to do something tomorrow. Because you have time. You're not going to die tomorrow. And
Just Andy predicts the future. You're not going to die tomorrow for 25
well,
cents.
you know what I mean. Unless he gets hit with something.
That's funny. I know you have something to say, Lou. I'm trying to get to the new people. Did you want to offer a comment?
In a way, it was about talking about tape. About,
You said tape.
Doctors and information. About 4.5 years ago, I had surgery and had to go once a month to the doctor. And I became friends with his secretary, so I got to sit in her office behind the people at the counter. And one day I was sitting there waiting, and the salesperson came in from the drug company, and I watched as she went in the cabinets, pulled all the competition's medications, put it in her bag, and put hers there, and tried to talk to the doctor, and the doctor just said, "I don't have time, I'll just look at the pamphlet." So doctors get the same information as we do, and it doesn't mean that they know any more than what the drug company pamphlet says, because they don't have time in their life to go and look at the medical journals and to read all this stuff. They only go with what is brought to them in the office.
Yeah, and through conferences too. They attend conferences sponsored by drug companies. My mom works for the Los Angeles Convention Bureau, and I guess it was about a year ago, a pharmaceutical company that came up with a new blood pressure medicine rented out the LA Convention Center. That's a pretty big place, and they filled it up with doctors to introduce this medicine, and they had this whole day affair with lunch and stuff. And to compensate the doctors for being away from their office, each one was paid $1,000 for that day. It's kind of this weird conflict of interest that a lot of us don't really stop and think of much as a conflict of interest, because we have an idea in our heads. Doctors are benign entities that are there to only help us, and they have always our best interests at heart, and maybe we imagine they have more time than they do to sustain that, promise that they made a long time ago. And pharmaceutical companies are out there doing research, and gosh, they're going to improve our life, better living through chemistry, and it's not always the way it is. So those are things to think about too. You've had your, okay, I can't remember who's been up the longest. Whose arm hurts the most? Tape or no tape?
No tape.
No tape, okay.
What do you consider then when you say you're HIV positive then? What does it mean? Like,
personally,
to all of you? Like,
to me it's a really rotten social inconvenience. That means that Department of Social Services can come and take my son away, basically. I mean, I have a lot of issues with what a rotten label I've got on me, because I feel that I've lost my rights to privacy, I've lost my civil rights, and I've lost some human rights, and I've certainly lost the right to shop for life insurance and health insurance and to travel to certain countries. And I don't look very kindly on that at all. I think for having been given that diagnosis through a nonspecific antibody test, I have a right to be upset about that, and I find that very upsetting.
I mean, does that mean though, what I'm asking is what does it mean then when you test positive? Like, what is it? Does it, like, we're all here because we're positive.
Uh-huh.
So what does then that mean? Does that mean that there's a chance that there is no virus in us, or that there's no, what does it mean then technically? When you say I'm HIV positive, what is it that you're saying?
I think that we're all acknowledging that we were given a diagnostic test that came up with that result, but I don't think that any of us here this evening place great meaning on it. We've studied a lot, and I know you're here for the first time, if you look in the book, there's a section on the tests and stuff, and it will give you some idea that the tests are not specific. They're not testing for HIV virus. So you can't say if you've taken an HIV test, you have the virus, you're infected. You can't say that. They're called an antibody test, but they're not testing for the HIV antibodies. They're testing for proteins that are supposed to describe HIV antibodies, but also describe lots of other antibodies and just other conditions that can be in the blood of people who are perfectly healthy. So it's not that you can say you're HIV antibody positive from these tests either. What do they say? Until there is some research done, which should have been done in 1985 when the test was introduced to the general public, that takes an HIV test and actually calibrates it against the finding of actual virus, we will not know what a positive test result means. And I don't know what it means to you guys, but everybody has something to say about it.
Go ahead.
Just go ahead.
What I'd like to point out, and I don't know if it's in the new book, but if you look at there's a leaflet which accompanies a Western blot test, and I believe it's the Elijah as well. And if you read this, it essentially says it all about the HIV test. And I can't quote it, but I'll tell you precisely what it says. The number one, it says, this is not a diagnostic for AIDS or HIV, which means it is not to be used to determine if you have the virus. It says that a positive test does not mean that you have come in contact or have the HIV virus, and a negative test does not mean you have not come in contact with or will not develop AIDS. In other words, what this leaflet, and I'm totally serious about this, what it's saying is that this test does absolutely nothing. And what the medical company is doing is covering their ass. Because when the shit hits the fan, they'll go, it says in our leaflet, it's not designed, I don't want to be on camera. It does not want, we never said it was a diagnostic. We said right here, we didn't say it means a positive means you're going to get it, and negative. That's exactly what it does. So there's a lot of interesting facts and a lot of things which are going to just, that commercial things that make you go, you're just going to, you're going to be inundated by little bits of trivia like that. And really quick, not to monopolize, but what I want to say to you about as far as how you feel about, I think what Christine and what a lot of us are saying is that trust how you feel. Remember, when you get sick with something, you usually have symptoms. And if you aren't getting sick, and don't forget, we get sick. We get the flus. You'll get colds, just like people with or without HIV, whatever you want to think. Moderate yourself, and don't become paranoid about that test. Trust how you feel. And I made that decision. I decided that since there are no new diseases to AIDS, you get AIDS, there are 30 pre-existing conditions that develop. Nothing is new. Nothing is specific to HIV. And that could be anywhere from the flu to pneumonia to yeast infections, which most likely you and I aren't going to get. But just remember, go on how you feel, and don't get paranoid. Keep yourself in check. Just go, I feel good. I feel good. I guess there's really no reason. I told my doctor, I said, what? Just treat me for things as I get them. If I get pneumonia, treat me for pneumonia. Because it's the same thing, whether or not you're HIV positive or not. If your immune
system is depressed, it's depressed no matter what.
Another thing too is every infection is opportunistic. Everybody who has the flu has an opportunistic infection, but we only use that word opportunistic when it comes to HIV and AIDS. All illness is opportunistic. It really is. So, you know, that there's this whole language that's come up with this that you have to kind of watch out for as well. Did you want to, about HIV positive?
What?
Did you want to say something?
Well, I just want to say that I hate the term. I think it's such a false term. It's like when you're saying, do you still beat your wife? It's like if you say yes or no, you're admitting to the concept, which I don't admit to at all. And I don't know what to tell people except that a kind of analogy said, you know, it's just... because then if you try to go into the whole science of it, you often lose people.
Yeah,
but,
you can, definitely.
you know.
Erik?
Yeah.
On how I feel, let's see, what I can offer is, well, we do know that in the book there's about roughly 68 other conditions that could cause you to test positive, right? So about
And it's also
68.
a little green pamphlet back there too, a little green thing.
I do know when I was 18 I had hepatitis. We know that can cause a false positive. And then, like I said, when I went to Europe and worked there, I was vaccinated for TB. So I have hepatitis and TB running around in my blood now. So, and the HIV test will pick up on those enzymes or whatever, DNA. So who knows if I'm a false positive or a real positive? Who knows what does it mean to me? I don't know. What it means to me is that it screwed my life up. You know, I'm healthy, but my life is screwed up. Now, as far as taking care of my health goes, what I did, I took the Eastern route of medicine a couple years ago. We all know, I think Western medicine is just a few hundred years old. So all this stuff is basically pretty new. I have a friend who said, well, Erik, why don't you go the Eastern route of medicine? So he had a friend, he recommended me to a healer who deals with teas and herbs and stuff like that. He's from India. And his medicine is 2,000 years old, the stuff that he's doing. They've been doing it for 2,000 years. And I told him that I was positive at the end of our meeting. And he said, oh, don't worry about that. And I said, well, what do you mean? He talked to me. He goes, you're really basically a healthy person, but we can help you with a few things like allergies and stuff like that. So I did my 7-month course of teas and herbs, which was like $200 a month. But I wanted to do this anyway for health purposes and whatever, just to be sure, the HIV wasn't going to get me. He said HIV is really not a problem for people. It is one of the many things, if you believe in HIV, that runs around in our blood system. It's just there. But when you find out you're positive and you let it take control of your life and your brain, then you're going to get sick, he said. So he says basically what he's saying is psychosomatic. HIV, what do we used to know? HIV equals death. Okay, that goes off in our head. The little death light goes off in our head. Okay, he said don't ever let the HIV equals death take a hold of you because you will get sick and die. He said just think yourself, well, no, think of it as just being positive and don't pay attention to it. Live your life. And that's what I've been doing. So that's, how I handled, that's what I was told. And, as far as being positive, well, what does it mean? I don't know. Who knows,
One thing I want to read, it's a quote in the book on page 9. It's the second one down if anybody wants to look at it while I'm reading. It's from Dr. Val Turner, who's a physician of emergency medicine in Australia. And he started investigating the whole issue of HIV, positive, negative. What does it mean? Because he works in emergency medicine and is covered with blood, for many hours in any given day in emergency cases. And he's done an incredible amount of research with other doctors who are now known as the Perth team into the HIV test. He says the HIV antibody tests do not detect a virus. They test for any antibodies that may react with an assortment of proteins experts claim are specific to HIV. The fact is that an antibody test, even if repeated and found positive 1,000 times, does not prove the presence of a viral infection. I mean, that's just the way it is. An antibody test cannot prove the presence of infection even if you do it 1,000 times and get the same answer. It's still just telling you got the same answer 1,000 times. It doesn't mean the virus is there. And we don't have diagnostics that are being used today to tell us when the virus is there. I know there's you and you and you. So we'll just go order white, black, white. Tape or no tape?
No tape.
No tape.
I can identify with this situation. Same thing that I went through 2 years ago. And you're talking about Crixivan with the poison label on it and asking questions and not getting the right answers. So I did a lot of research, did a lot of reading, looked into the Eastern route of medicine, and basically I was studying the Ayurvedic medicine, where food or any nutrients that have intelligence, work within the human body, anything organic. And if this is a microorganism, the one question that the doctor couldn't answer, and he was a specialist, I said, what is this medicine made of? Does it have intelligence? Is it powdered asbestos, or what is it? How do they make it? What's it made from? And he couldn't tell me. And he said, look on the internet. And those bottles are big. So I'm thinking, what is in this bottle that you're taking every day, all day? Does it have any, does it have any use? How does it work? I don't understand. Do any of you know?
Like, what does it know what to kill, or what does it
Right,
know
it's
what
not
to...
organic.
Well, yeah, I
It's
think
not
it's
organic.
pretty well known at this point that the AZT is non-specific in its action because it's designed to go where there's reverse transcriptase going on, but reverse transcriptase is a part of all kinds of cells that have nothing to do with viral infection, and it's also a non-specific terminator of DNA chains. And,
something also that your body closely produces itself, but AZT is a close molecular mimic, but it's not precise.
It mimics, it caps off DNA chains by doing everything up to a certain point, and then it puts on a false hat, so to speak, and it ends the DNA chain right there.
So what's in the capsule?
Geez, we have a pharmacologist on our advisory board. If you wanted to find out the answer to that question, I'd be happy to put you in touch with them. We have 2 pharmacologists on our advisory board.
I'd like to know.
Yeah, I will put you in touch with them. Just email me.
In the
But with
PDR,
regard
they
to...
do list in the PDR, they usually list...
Yeah, they do list that. Yeah, you can get... I even got it at like just a regular old bookstore. I get medical dictionaries and stuff, and it's fascinating what you can find in those books about drugs and stuff. And you can get the Merck manual, which is very much,
Right.
medical terminology. You can also get more layman type informational books. We also know, however, protease inhibitors are not particularly specific to HIV protease because we see them affecting the proteases of the digestive system, because we use, if you ever get a thing of digestive enzymes, you'll see that there's aspartoprotease and all kinds of other proteases that we use in the digestive process, and here people are taking protease inhibitors are having fat metabolism disorders where they're not metabolizing their food properly. They're getting fat deposits, they're getting elevated cholesterol levels, they're getting weird distribution of body fat. That tells us protease inhibitors aren't particularly specific either. And we do know too that there's nothing about these medicines that are health enhancing. That is, they don't build anything up. They're destroyers. They're out to destroy, interrupt, and cut cut chains, cap things off, destroy. There's nothing that builds up. There's no, I guess in this sense, positive energy with them. It's all about destroying, capping off.
There's nothing organic about them.
No, I would definitely
They're not from nature.
step out on a limb and say there's nothing organic about them. We'll kind of move along here. Please contact us, though, if you want to talk to any of our advisory board members who are pharmacologists. Yes, sir.
Smart.
Kind of like plastic or paper.
More than the test being inaccurate and being useless, is it true on this very day there's no actual proof that HIV virus even exists?
We always get one in every crowd. Well, it's a subject that I don't start off the event with because it's a really weird concept to explore. But if you go by what the rules of microbiology are, what is standard, what is accepted practice for identifying a viral entity, you could say that no, HIV has not been isolated as an autonomous viral entity. And therefore, there's you could actually ask the question, does HIV exist? On page 40 of the book, that I asked that question and talk about it, and there, definitely, if you want to find out more about that issue, visit a website called virusmyth.com, M-Y-T-H, virusmyth.com. But it sounds like it's woo, way out there. Oh, now they say that, okay, AIDS doesn't exist, the test doesn't work, HIV doesn't even exist. You would be surprised at what a well-founded, reasonable, logical argument there is asking that question. Has it been shown to exist? Another great resource for information about that in very, very direct layman terms is rethinkingaids.com. There's a news journal there. It's now called Rethinking AIDS. It was called Reappraising AIDS. You can pick up a copy right there. You can call the editor of that journal too. You can email the editor of that journal. That's the interesting thing too. People on, like, say, this side of this issue, we'll give you our phone number. You can email us, call us. We're always available. Try doing that with David Ho or Robert Gallo and see how far you get. But there's lots of information to explore on that subject, and if you have an interest, I would strongly encourage you.
I don't know if you've seen it, just following up. Supposedly, there's been pictures in, I think it's been Time magazine, and as recently as a fall issue of Pause magazine, they said, this is the AIDS virus, and they had a big picture, a big blue, looked like a planet.
Well, what they're not showing you is that most of those are artist renderings, by the way, because if you have an electron micrograph, it does not come in color. So you have an automatic problem with the reality of it right there. If it's in color, it's been dickered with. But also, too, you can show something and call it HIV, and it can appear in a photograph like this, but what you need to ask, was that photograph cropped? Because the only electron micrographs that I or anybody else is aware of at this point that are supposed to be showing HIV are this big, and in that is one thing that somebody circled and said is HIV that looks exactly like all the other things that aren't called HIV. And 13 years after HIV was said to cause AIDS, the first electron micrograph that was said to be of an HIV isolate was published. 13 years later. When it was published, if you look at what is called HIV, what's circled, what's cropped in that photo, it's missing certain things that would describe a retrovirus, and that in particular would describe HIV. One of those things that's missing are, in all those pictures everywhere, the knobs on the virus? Well, that thing doesn't have the knobs. And the knobs are supposed to represent GP 120. That's supposed to be a major component of the virus, yet what they're calling 13 years later from this supposed HIV isolate is something that doesn't have the characteristics of the virus that it's said to be.
I'm surprised that a big magazine like Pause magazine would be that irresponsible, because they should say this may be the virus, not this is the virus.
Somebody told them it was.
Yeah.
Well, look where their advertising dollars come from, and that kind of explains the magazine. Okay, let's see. Wait, yeah. Tape or no tape?
Tape is fine.
Okay.
I'm going to give you a humdinger now.
Okay. Oh, it's about time to go. No, I'm saying.
If I carry on, tell me. Let me just first explain. I have a lot of biology background. I have a lot of various background. My undergraduate was in vocal music. I have a doctorate in philosophy and religion.
Wow.
And I've studied a lot of biology for many years. It's always been an interest. I used holistic medicine for 15 years before I was even diagnosed with HIV. The only reason I tested was I was in my first relationship. I worked as an AIDS worker for many years. I was an AIDS information specialist for the state of California and the Gay and Lesbian Center here in Los Angeles, even before the days of HIV, before the days of AZT. I didn't take any medication when I was first tested because I was perfectly healthy. There was no reason to, and the only thing at the time was AZT, and I saw more people killed with AZT. There was no reason to. And just touching on your comment about doctors' lack of knowledge, most general practice physicians in this country don't know enough about hepatitis A. I mean, how more of a common transmitted disease can you get? I know people who've gotten infected whose doctors told them, oh, it's been more than 3 days, you don't need a gamma globulin shot, it's too late. And they wind up progressing to hepatitis A. I was disgustingly healthy. I didn't get the flu. until in Halloween night of 1995, I got food poisoning at a restaurant. And I would have been lucky had it would been salmonella. It was not. I had diarrhea for 3 months.
Eef.
I lost 15 pounds in that process. And within 30 days after recovering from the food poisoning, my first Kaposi's lesions appeared. That was in January. By April, I couldn't work. By August, I was on chemotherapy. I was on chemotherapy for Kaposi's for 8 months. But there is no more Kaposi's. I started, that was the summer, the drugs, the protease inhibitors came out. And I went on them. And by January of the following year, my body started to turn around. I had, in 3 months prior to that, I was 118 pounds.
How much do you weigh now?
165 to 170. Most people thought I was history. But I took the drugs and suffered through their consequences, and the chemotherapy and its consequences, and having my red blood cells drop and needing blood transfusions, and my white blood cells drop and needing Neupogen injections daily. And I got through it. However, before I started any of the drugs, I was starting some damn aggressive holistic medicine. I had 3 different holistic doctors. I had a traditional homeopath, I had a traditional Chinese doctor, and I had a very aggressive holistic doctor who was on top of everything new that was possibly out there. And they worked together, along with my Western physicians. My first drug cocktail eventually failed. It was Crixivan. I don't eat at the same time every day. I couldn't possibly keep on that regimen. And they stuck me on another one, despite the fact that I was feeling better. My viral load when the Crixivan failed was over 400,000. My T cells had remained at 300 the whole time. Well, I'll take that back. At the point on the chemotherapy, I was down to about 50 T cells. But yet, during that whole period, Kaposi's was my only opportunistic infection. I never had anything else. And there's no question it was all that holistic medicine that was keeping the disease away, even as my body was suffering from supposed immune suppression. I had gone on a couple of other cocktails. It supposedly dropped my viral load to undetectable, but my T cells never changed. Well, I wasn't ever sick. No wonder my T cells didn't change. I didn't get anything. A couple of months ago, actually upon seeing your literature posted on a telephone pole in the middle of a Catskill.
It wasn't me.
Although I had heard of your organization.
Can you prove that?
Before. And I sat there reading it. And it started to confirm a lot of things I suspected for a long time. One of my Chinese doctors would always say to me, as he'd always put a hand on me when he'd say this, he would say, listen to your body. Good body. He'd always touch me when he'd do this in his very broken English. And there would be periods when I'd take these drugs. Now, again, I've been practicing aggressive holistic medicine for 20 years. I'm used to taking literally a handful of vitamins at a time. I could take 30 pills in a swallow. Mostly vitamins. So I was not unaccustomed to swallowing large amounts of pills. But there would be times where just the thought of swallowing my 8 or 10 cocktail pills was absolutely revolting. The thought of swallowing them was revolting. And I'd have to force them down. A couple of months ago, this period of the revulsion lasted for several months. And I thought, my body is trying to tell me something. And it was a combination of all these things that I stopped my drugs 2.5 months ago. The last remnants of the scars from the KS are now almost gone. My gums, all my KS, Mother Nature had a good practical joke with me. Neil loves to talk and sing and eat and suck a few other things, gave me all my KS in my mouth. He said, I don't just wear to get that clean. And filled my mouth with KS. My gums had severely receded because of it. The chemotherapy caused a lot of bone loss. My gums are now healing. The gum recession is just amazingly just disappearing. My current Chinese doctor and acupuncturist, who's at the other alive and well.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
The whole thing we won't get into
Yeah.
here. She deals exclusively with HIV and has for 8 years. The woman was amazing. She would do a clinic where she would have 8 tables and go from one patient to another over 4 hours constantly. I don't know how she could do it. She has seen many people with HIV, both who have progressed to AIDS and who have not. And she says there has never been one case that she has seen where there was not pre-existing somehow of some liver disease, whether there was hepatitis, whether it was Epstein-Barr, whether it was herpes. There was some other type of major liver dysfunction disease, and these things leave scars on your liver that don't go away. Now, I've had hepatitis A, I've had hepatitis B, I've had syphilis, and I've had gonorrhea. I was sexually active since I was 11. No great surprise. But it wasn't until I had major cytogenic pathogens in my system, the food poisoning, that I progressed to full-blown AIDS. Now, she's not necessarily saying that HIV isn't involved here, but you have got to have these other critical cytogenic factors in your body in order for this to happen. And this has been well documented, even with HIV study. So even if we do have HIV, and again, this is a great hypothesis, even those who would say that HIV is there is no one out there that can show you in any test that it has ever progressed anyone to disease without these other underlying cytogenic factors. There's got to be something in your body that is going to destroy your ability even to deal with HIV. We are constantly bombarded by viruses and bacteria, hourly. Your body has defenses to deal with these things. Something has to get in the way of your body dealing with them for you to get sick with anything. That is the way the body functions. And Eastern medicine and other forms of holistic medicine deal with illness not from the perspective that something has invaded your body, but the fact that your body did not fight it off. That is the concept of disease. So what they fix is not the disease.
It's you.
What they fix is you.
Yeah.
You fix you, you get better. If you had any idea how many pathogens come in contact with your skin, mind you, your main immune defense organ, every hour, it would blow your mind away. You touch pathogens constantly. They're constantly in contact with you, but your body effectively fights them. Something else is going on here, whether it's toxins from the environment, whether it's toxins from drugs, whether it's other cytogenic things that get into your body that cause damage. This is what needs to be looked at in dealing with people that get ill. And getting HIV or getting positive is not going to give you AIDS by itself. And if you can treat your whole body and keep yourself healthy, no matter what it is, that's what's going to happen.
I was wondering where you're going. That was interesting.
I didn't know where I was going on. I'd eventually get somewhere. But I've been on both sides of it, and been there and back.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm just a stubborn son of a bitch. Y'all will get rid of me that easy. I had things to do yet, damn it, and I was going to do them.
Well, we have a guy who's not here this evening. I put him in touch with somebody who contacted me by email. He's HIV positive, and he was diagnosed with lymphoma. He took some of the chemotherapy. He did it with his own schedule on his own terms, and that was, I don't know how many years ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago. He practices Tai Chi. He owns his own design firm. He likes to go hiking. He's not on any HIV medicines, yet he had what is to be considered one of the hallmark, AIDS-defining illnesses, which oddly enough can be caused by the medicines themselves. But, you're certainly an interesting case for getting something really, really serious, getting over it, and going on.
And I guess, just to interject one more thing, one of the big questions I have now is, maybe I would have gotten better anyway. Maybe I would have gotten better anyway. Maybe the drugs had nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
And those people that maybe had died were going to die anyway for whatever reasons, whether it was their own, the way they dealt with things or the other toxins.
His roommate doesn't want him going off the drugs. He wants to go off the drugs. We had to arrange his time to talk. And when I got on the phone with him, one of the first things he told me is that his boyfriend was 27 years old and had tested positive. I'm not certain of how many years prior to this experience, but decided after several years of being positive to go on the combination drug therapies. They kept making him feel dizzy, and he was told, well, you know, you have to go through this period of time with certain side effects. One day he felt dizzy while on a walk in Central Park. He died of heart failure at 27. I mean, there's stories that go every which way, you know, and until we have scientific studies, we're just going to have a bunch of stories to tell each other. But the interesting thing is the scientific literature does not support that protease inhibitor drugs mixed with chemotherapy drugs like AZT and DDI have given people health benefits in the long run, have been able to prevent them from becoming ill in the long run. You can't say this after a study of 22 weeks, 15 weeks, you know, you cannot say that. And they have not been shown, absolutely not been shown, in comparison to matched groups of people who test HIV positive, who decide to take the drug therapies, people who test HIV positive matched, who decide to forego the therapies. We do not know if treatment equals life. The scientific literature does not tell us that. So it's a really important thing to remember. We've got like, we should have left about 5 minutes ago. So let's go really, really quickly. And whose thing is ringing? Comment, question?
Well, I just had a comment about, you know, when people say,
tape or no tape?
No, you know, why am I positive? And I think, Adam, I'm not sure if you discussed this already, but they already did a study, and they found out, well, they found out before they did the study that they dilute the test 400 times, and people who have a huge amount of antibodies before the test will usually show up positive, and people with low antibodies will show up negative. So there are two groups they separate when they do tests.
Actually, it's really interesting, that dilution rate you bring up. I accidentally got in an email discussion. I didn't realize I was in an email discussion with a professor of mathematics at Oberlin University, and a guy who just won a huge grant because he invented an HIV test that supposedly tells you how long you've been infected. I didn't realize I was talking to them, and they raised some questions. Somebody sent them my book about HIV tests, and I brought up that dilution rate. And we were talking about that. Most diagnostics, most blood diagnostics are you either use straight serum or you dilute up to 16 times, maybe a little more than that. The HIV test, you use a 400 dilution. It's 1 to 400. 400 drops of dilution for 1 drop of blood. Normally, when you have a dilution rate, you have an explanation somewhere in the scientific literature that tells you how that determination for dilution was designed, what caused that to be, why we should dilute this many times. There's a reasonable explanation somewhere. There's a reference to something. None with HIV tests. When you don't dilute people's blood, when you use straight serum and you test on people who are HIV negative, the people who are HIV negative, undiluted, test HIV positive.
That's right.
So it seems as though everybody's blood, when undiluted, tests HIV positive, and there's no explanation for the 400 dilution. Really quick, and then we really need to kind of like start winding it up, and you got to eat some of those snacks. I can't take all this home.
I just have a quick comment about the drugs, about protease inhibitors. For some reason, they do these studies. I don't know how they get funded for them, and they publish them in mainstream journals. They looked at what if the protease inhibitors inhibit other protease enzymes, like she was saying, and they found out it does inhibit the protease enzyme of Candida. Candida is very common; it's very popular among the general population, and I mean it's a triple threat. It's Candida is an AIDS-defining illness. It can also be immune suppressive. If you have Candida, it can suppress your T cells. And it can also cause a positive HIV test result. And now we just found out that it can also be inhibited by the protease inhibitors that are given to treat HIV. Also PCP, they just discovered that it inhibits PCP now. Some enzyme, some enzyme that works with the PCP organism that causes that pneumonia is inhibited by the protease inhibitor drugs that they give people for HIV. So go figure.
Just to quick clarify, people don't realize, everybody has candida. It's when you have a candida imbalance and then it overgrows.
Everybody
candida
has PCP.
It's one of those things that exists in all living organisms.
Just like
In all-
everybody
in all
has PCP too.
You know, mammals,
Yeah.
it just exists in everybody. It's when it grows out of proportion that you have a problem.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody has PCP in their lungs, just about every human being on Earth. It's only a problem. It used to only show up in people that had taken chemotherapy, whose immune systems were very low, people who were under an incredible amount of stress, whether that was physical, let's say malnourished. It was very common to see people exiting concentration camps with PCP pneumonia. The physical and emotional stress caused that. Also, too, what's interesting about stress, whether that be physical or emotional, is our body produces something called corticosteroids. You can get them also at the pharmacy, and those are immune suppressants. When you take the corticosteroids or you give them to yourself, you're suppressing your immune system. And where your mind goes when you have a positive diagnosis is it can lead you directly to some, immune suppression through
There's an
the stress
incredible
of
mortality rate in the first year of widows, and they die generally from immune suppressive diseases within the first year.
Well,
It's stress and depression is the number one thing that will suppress your immune system.
yeah, I wouldn't doubt that. Okay, quick,
One
then we got
question,
okay,
real quick.
sorry.
Because I've been, no tape, please. You know Chris used to come.
Yeah.
And he helped me out a lot because I've been sick for a long time.
I know you.
Yeah.
How
and
are you?
I'm doing a lot better.
Oh, good.
But I've been through hell with these doctors.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't for Chris to be in the hospital with me to fight these doctors, I wouldn't have made it.
He's been an amazing friend.
Yeah, he has.
Yeah.
He's helped me so much. He's fought. All my other friends are dead now. And they kept telling me that he was crazy, that he was cynical. I kept protecting him. They tried to force me with the drugs. I would hide them in the pudding and the Coke, anything I could do to hide these drugs, not to take them. And then they came one day into my room, like 7 people surrounded my bed, social worker, nurses, and like 3 doctors from AHF. Said I was going to be in my coffin if I didn't take these drugs. And I said, I'm not going to take them. They kept coming in my room saying that I had lymphoma. I said, I know I don't have that. There's not cancer in my family. I don't believe that. They kept coming in saying that we're going to start surgery. I go, no, you're not going to cut me open. No way, And I had an awful social worker. I didn't like her. I didn't trust her. If it wasn't for Chris to be there and fight this lady, because they were going to put me in a hospice. And I said, no way. I'm not dying. I know I'm not. And then they said I had CMV. They just kept bombarding me, saying everything they could tell me that I had. And I did have diarrhea for a whole year. It was a nightmare. I am on the drugs right now. I hate them. I keep telling them I want to go off of them. I see 2 doctors, but they're both. I talked to them about Dr. Duesberg. They said he's a quack. But there's this smirk that they give me when they say that, and they walk out of the room. The one nurse she was a nurse practitioner at HF. She kept saying that Chris was cynical, and she was just a mean lady. I just didn't want her to be my doctor. She wasn't even a doctor. She was a nurse practitioner. And so they finally gave me Dr. Prokipak, which, he's helped me. But, I keep telling him I don't want to be on these drugs. I know there's something that, every day I deal with something. It's not like a normal life. That's my whole life is HIV. I can't concentrate on going to school, or, I lost my job. Just the whole thing with it. And so I just believe that they don't like when you ask questions. They get very angry. And I haven't found one doctor that you can ask a question and that they'll give you a straight answer. So there's something right there that tells you something's up. And so till this day, I still take, I take Sestiva, Epivir, and Xerit. My weight's finally back up because they give me human growth hormone. But I just think something's up, and I just fight them every day. Every time I have to go every 2 months to get my viral load and my T cells. And I'm undetectable, and I think it's 200 now for my T cells, but I still deal with a lot with my stomach. And so I just want to quit them. And I feel like I'm in a trap, you
Yeah.
know, a trap that you can't get out of.
You're in the right place.
Yeah.
I know.
Good luck. We support you.
Yeah, we support you.
Christine
Yeah.
can only go so far. She's afraid of losing her kid. There's been some cases of mothers having their children taken away from them.
Right.
Sure. There have been several cases you may have read about. If you haven't, you know, we've got it covered here, of mothers losing their children to the state authorities. So she has her one foot on the brake and one foot on the gas. You know, I don't have any kids, and I'll say on camera, get off the poison. I mean, there's other people here in this room that won't say it on camera, and might not say it to your face, but I'll do both. Get off the drugs.
No, I'm told that. I live with Chris right now because he's the one that helped me. I lost my apartment, so he took me in, and he's been through hell with me. And if it wasn't for him, you know, he praises you all the time. He loves you.
I love Chris. Yeah.
He talks about you all the time still. And, you know, he's in Florida right now, but I told him I was coming to the meeting today because I need a way out.
Yeah.
I'm so trapped.
Well, we're here. You know, we're here by phone, we're here by email. Rodney and Bob, thank you, sorry, I just blanked out. I know you and I appreciate you and I love you. Bob are here from ACT UP and they, you know, can help you. I mean, you want to talk to any of the panelists, I'm sure they'd be happy to exchange phone numbers with you.
Yeah, if any of you want to talk to any of us,
I'm available.
We'd be happy to talk to you.
You know, anytime.
So, use our numbers.
Do you have your healthcare practitioner?
I do.
thing?
I have a couple, and I just got a line.
It really sucks because it's like not the healthcare practitioner list, but I mean, you're in a trap. It's true because like if you want to go the alternative route, a lot of insurance doesn't cover it, and it comes out of your own pocket. It's so much easier to get in the system and take what they give you. But if you want to go an alternative route, there's a list of people that are local.
And I just found a great one. She practices here in Los Angeles and also in Washington, D.C. She's bi-coastal. She's an MD. She's a former neurosurgeon. She's a medical doctor for a lot of people on the Olympic team. I'm not sure what sport. She was leaving to minister to them for some event. She now practices nutritional medicine, herbology, and acupuncture. She charges a flat rate of $250 for the first visit, no charges thereafter. None. And if you want to get supplements through her, she'll charge you for supplements, but one-time only fee. You can call her for phone consultations. When she's away, you can see her as many times as you want. Her name has not yet been added to this, but and then there's other doctors we're adding all the time to this list. We just get a little bit behind in the office. If anybody wants to volunteer and help that has computer skills, we could sure use you. But I just encourage you. You know, it sounds like you've just been fighting this battle, and you've had this. I mean, I know from Chris, and I'm really happy to see you here, to see you.
They won't even let him in. My one doctor won't even let him come in anymore.
Yeah.
Not surprised.
Yeah, and you know what? Chris is cynical and crazy, but I love him. He's a great guy.
Yeah.
And you know, he's right about certain things, and I'm glad he's been your friend, and we're here to be your friends too. So, you know, please stay in touch, and we'll do whatever we can to help you make a decision that feels right. You know? So we gotta kind of.
Do you have a phone number or?
Say it to the mic. The phone number is toll free. 877-92-ALIVE. That's 877-922-5483. Our website is questionaids.com. And it's toll free. National and Canada, 877-92-ALIVE. If you're calling from outside of the United States, it's 818-780-1875. And thank you and good evening. Thank you, Ralph, very much.
I've been reading